Welcome to This Is How We Heal with naturopath, herbalist, and author Anthea Koulouros. With over 3 decades of clinical experience guiding thousands on their healing journeys, Anthea invites you into honest, heartfelt conversations about what really gets in the way of health and healing and what gently brings us back to ourselves. If you're sick and tired of feeling sick and tired, overwhelmed by wellness noise, or just yearning to feel like yourself again, you're in the right place. This podcast is for anyone feeling burnt out, lost in a sea of symptoms, or simply longing for a deeper connection to their health, their body, and their truth.
Hello and welcome back to This Is How We Heal. I'm Anthea Koulouros, naturopath and someone who has spent many years sitting with patients navigating some of the most complex health journeys imaginable. Wherever you are right now, walking, resting, driving, or simply pausing in your day, I'm so glad you're here. This is a space where we slow things down, where we look at health and healing with curiosity rather than certainty. Today, I'm continuing to share content from the book I'm currently writing. It is one I've wanted to speak about for a very long time because it sits quietly underneath so many healing journeys, and yet it is rarely spoken about directly. We're going to talk about cognitive barriers to healing, brain fog, mental exhaustion, forgetfulness, overwhelm, the inability to think clearly, the inability to follow through, the inability to hold information, the inability to make decisions, and also the shame that often follows all of that. I cannot tell you how many people sit across from me in clinic saying things like, I know what I need to do, I just can't seem to do it. I can't think anymore. My brain feels broken. I can't concentrate. I feel silly. I walk into rooms and forget why I'm there. I used to be sharp. I don't feel like myself anymore. And underneath many of these conversations sits another fear entirely. Am I getting dementia? Is this Alzheimer's? Is this what happened to my mother? Is this what happened to my father? Today, I want to hold this conversation carefully because the modern world is cognitively exhausting. Many people are overloaded, inflamed, underslept, chronically stressed, emotionally burdened, nutritionally depleted, digitally overwhelmed, and trying to heal inside systems that demand productivity even while unwell. And perhaps one of the cruelest parts of illness is this. The very condition requiring healing can impair the very cognitive capacity needed to heal. It's a vicious loop. Illness impairs cognition, and impaired cognition makes healing harder. The arrow runs in both directions. So today, I want to talk about what cognitive obstruction actually is, what contributes to it, and why so many people are experiencing it. How stress, trauma, inflammation, hormones, sleep, gut health, and modern living shape our cognitive landscape, and why shame worsens it, and what we can begin doing to gently support the mind again. Because before a person can heal, often they first need enough cognitive space to even begin. Let's begin with brain fog, one of those terms that people use constantly, yet many people still feel dismissed when they describe it. Because it is difficult to measure, it is difficult to explain, and difficult to capture in a blood test. But anyone who has experienced it knows it is real. Brain fog is not simply forgetting where you left your keys. It can feel like thinking through wet cement, trying to read while exhausted, trying to process information underwater, trying to remember something while someone keeps interrupting your thoughts. You know the information is somewhere inside of you, but you just can't access it clearly. And this affects healing profoundly because healing requires attention and planning and memory and consistency and decision making and organization and follow through and emotional regulation and motivation and capacity, all functions of the brain. And when cognition is impaired, even basic self-care can feel monumental. Now, I'm not saying that we can't heal if we have poor cognition. We can. We just want to better position our nervous system so we have full capacity, full perspective, and greater resilience in healing. Some things like preparing meals, taking supplements, booking appointments, or remembering instructions, reading information, the cooking, the shopping, responding to emails or phone calls, exercising, paying bills, all those things. It is hard. People often blame themselves for not being disciplined enough. But what if the issue is not laziness? Because I hear that a lot. Am I just lazy? What if the system itself is just overloaded? What if the brain has become inflamed and exhausted and hypervigilant or sleep deprived or cognitively depleted? I think many people are walking around believing they have failed morally when actually they are just struggling physiologically. I sometimes wonder if many people today have ever truly experienced deep mental rest, not being distracted or numbed out, not scrolling, not binge watching, but that genuine cognitive spaciousness where it feels like stillness, a slowing down. How about unfragmented attention? Our nervous systems and cognitive systems are now being bombarded almost continuously. The notifications and the emails and the headlines and the news alerts, all that noise, multitasking, artificial lights, performance pressure, productivity culture, the list goes on. And all of this is occurring while people are simultaneously parenting, caregiving, working, managing relationships, transitioning into perimenopause, recovering from burnout, whatever it is. The human brain was not designed for uninterrupted stimulation. William James, one of the early psychologists who deeply explored attention and consciousness, spoke about the importance of habit and mental energy. And today we are leaking mental energy constantly. Many people no longer have uninterrupted attention. And attention is one of the foundations of healing. Because where attention goes, energy flows. Yet modern life continuously fragments attention. And I've spoken about fragmentation as one of the greatest barriers of healing. I think this is why so many people feel scattered, fragmented, mentally fatigued, and unable to complete simple tasks. Not because they're weak, but because their attentional systems are overwhelmed. And what about how stress changes the brain? One of the most important things people need to understand is this: chronic stress does change the brain. Physiologically, it does. Sustained stress affects areas of the brain involved in memory, attention, decision making, emotional regulation, and even motivation. When the nervous system remains in prolonged survival states, the brain shifts priorities. Healing becomes secondary. Long-term thinking becomes harder. Planning becomes harder. Even creativity and memory becomes harder. This is why stressed people often become forgetful, reactive, disorganized, mentally flooded, because the brain becomes more focused on immediate survival. And many people who have been living in chronic low-grade survival mode for years, sometimes decades, because of financial pressure or the things that we just mentioned, it accumulates. And yes, the body keeps a score, but so does the mind. How about trauma and hypervigilance? Trauma profoundly affects cognition, and trauma does not only mean catastrophic events, it can be growing up in unpredictability, never feeling emotionally safe, being chronically criticized, walking on eggshells, experiencing bullying, medical anxiety or medical trauma, abandonment, and so on. When a nervous system has learned to scan constantly and continuously for danger, attention becomes hijacked. Hypervigilance consumes enormous cognitive energy. A traumatized brain is often not resting. It's constantly scanning, monitoring, anticipating, protecting. And when the brain is using energy to survive perceived danger, there is less energy available for memory, concentration, and higher cognitive functioning. This is why many traumatized people describe feeling mentally exhausted, because their nervous systems are working overtime and often silently. One of the reasons I speak so often about holistic health is because cognition is never separate from the body. The brain is not floating independently above the body. Everything affects cognition, from hormones, inflammation, sleep, blood sugar dysregulation, gut health, nutrient deficiencies, For example, perimenopause and menopause can profoundly affect memory, concentration, and verbal recall. Many women become frightened during this transition because they suddenly cannot access words, remember names, or think with the same speed. And remember, simultaneously, they're working and parenting and caring for aging parents and so on. But they're also blaming themselves for not functioning the way they once did. Sleep deprivation alone can dramatically impair cognition. So imagine hot flushes, sleep deprivation, waking up to wee in the middle of the night. Many people are profoundly sleep deprived for so many different reasons. And then there is their gut. Their gut brain connection is extraordinary. Inflammation in the gut can affect inflammation in the brain. The microbiome influences neurotransmitters. Gut dysfunction affects nutrient absorption. Immune activation in the gut affects cognition. And this is why people with gut dysbiosis, which we see so much in our clinic, food reactions or intolerances, chronic bloating and discomfort in the gut, big inflammatory conditions, digestive dysfunction often describe brain fog alongside these symptoms. The nutrient deficiencies aren't always so obvious. Iron, yes. B12, yes. But what about omega-3 deficiency or zinc deficiency, magnesium deficiency? And what about just being deficient in a macronutrient like protein? The brain requires nourishment. I wanted to mention about shame. I think one of the heaviest burdens people carry is not simply the brain fog itself, it is the shame about the fog, the self-criticism, the inner voice that says and runs behind in the background, what is wrong with me? Why can't I just do it? Why can't I just get organized? Why can't I just keep up? Why can everyone else cope but me? Now, the person is not only cognitive exhausted, they are emotionally attacking themselves for being cognitively exhausted. And shame consumes enormous energy. There is a difference between unwillingness and incapacity. Many people desperately want to heal. They simply do not currently have the cognitive, emotional, or physiological capacity to execute complex healing plans. And this is why overwhelm often worsens healing. Too many supplements, too many protocols, too much information, too many rules, too many things to tick off, too many conflicting voices, too many appointments, too many expectations. Healing begins not by adding more, but by reducing cognitive load, simplifying, slowing down, creating rest, restoring capacity, and really resting deeply. The fear of dementia I mentioned, and I hear this a lot because there are many patients whose parents have been diagnosed with dementia or Alzheimer's and are forced into this fear, this background panic, because the minute they forget something, automatically is this: am I going to become like mum and dad? Particularly if they watched a parent decline. And I want to say this gently: stress-related cognitive fog and neurodegenerative disease are not the same thing. Brain fog often fluctuates and it worsens with stress and it improves with rest. It shifts with sleep and it changes with hormonal states and it changes with cognitive load. And importantly, people experiencing functional cognitive fog are often highly aware of their symptoms, whereas progressive dementia often involves reduced awareness of impairment. That said, if fear is consuming you, please seek proper assessment. Do not sit alone in catastrophizing. Many people are carrying tremendous cognitive burdens that are treatable. Remember what they are: burnout, sleep deprivation, hormonal shifts, anxiety, nutritional deficiencies, inflammation, trauma, grief, gut dysfunction, and possibly even medication side effects. So, what actually helps? Firstly, compassion, not avoidance. Compassion. The nervous system does not heal well under chronic self attack. Secondly, reduce cognitive load. Simplify. Sometimes people do not need 12 new wellness practices, they need 3 foundational things done consistently: sleep, whole food nourishment, and a gentle rhythm, waking up at the same time, going to bed at the same time. Sometimes we need systems, reminders, lists and notes and alarms, meal preps, automated supports. There is no shame in scaffolding support around you. Thirdly, protect attention. Attention is one of the most precious resources we have. Reduce fragmentation where possible, periods without devices, walking without headphones, really reading slowly, single tasking, moments of silence, nature, breath, stillness. Fourthly, address your physiology. Is there something that you can do about your sleep and your gut health or inflammation? Is there something that you can do about your nutritional deficiencies or hormonal imbalance? The brain is a biological tissue. It requires support. And fifth, allow recovery to be gradual. Many people expect cognition to recover instantly, but healing cognitive exhaustion often happens slowly, subtly, incrementally. The fog lifts in moments, and it is something that you will notice. A clearer morning, a better conversation, the ability to read again and focus again, the ability to follow through, and what is more wonderful, the return of curiosity. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. I want to end today by saying this. If your mind feels tired, foggy, scattered, or overwhelmed, it may mean your system has been carrying too much for too long. And perhaps rather than asking, what is wrong with me, we begin asking, what has my mind been trying to carry? What has my nervous system adapted to? What conditions has my body been surviving inside? And what has been depleting my cognitive capacity? What might help restore it? Healing is not about removing symptoms. It is about restoring enough safety, nourishment, rhythm, support, and spaciousness for the mind to function clearly again, to think, to feel, to decide, to remember, to imagine, to create, and to rest. And perhaps most importantly, to stop turning against itself. If today's episode resonated, I'd love to hear from you. You can find me at apothecabyAnthea.com. And if you know someone with poor cognition, please share this episode with them. It might be exactly what they need to hear today. Until next time, be gentle with yourself, and I'll see you on the next episode of This Is How We Heal.
If this episode spoke to you, your healing journey doesn't have to end here. Join Anthea in her dedicated online community, the Staying Healthy Together Club, a space for real conversations and holistic health education with trusted resources. We'd love to see you there.